Hi, I'm Ravi. In this session, we will check how to launch AWS instance with Microsoft Windows OS and Amazon Linux OS. Let's list out requirements first. You need a subscription, AWS cloud subscription. Then you would need, for a machine or instance to run, you would need a CPU memory, set of CPU memory, then OS. Then you would need a disk. Number 5, user details. Number 6, password. Number 7, network. If you need an external connectivity, then firewall if you want to allow, deny any service ports. Number 9, tags. On AWS, every instance is identified by a unique instance ID. At the same time, there's an option to name it as well. So this is referred as tag and it's optional. And on client side, if you are trying to connect from a local machine running with Windows, and if you want to connect from Windows machine to AWS cloud instances. For Windows, for Windows OS, our connectivity is through RDP, and for Linux OS, connectivity is through SSH. And RDP is already available on this Windows machine, and we want to make sure RDP port is enabled, which is 3389, and for SSH port number is SS22. So these two ports should be enabled where it should be enabled on AWS firewall. Firewall on AWS is referred as security group, and network is referred as VPC, virtual private cloud, and CPU memory configuration is referred as instance type. And this is image available in image format, and disk is referred as volume. Now, for users, Windows default user is administrator, and for Amazon Linux is EC2 user. So these two are made available by AWS the moment you launch your machine. These two are made available. Only thing is either you have to set passwords using keys or use keys to log in. So here, password for Windows OS admin password can be generated with associated key file, and whereas on Amazon Linux, for Amazon Linux, connectivity is through SSH key string. So it is key-based authentication. Now, for instance type, depending on your workload and architecture requirements, select the instance type. If you need more memory, select instance type accordingly. If you need more compute CPU, select accordingly. Some of the classification is based on CPU, memory, disk, network, and there are a few other parameters which will contribute for the performance requirements. You can select based on your workload and architecture requirement. And similarly for OS as well, so select whichever is applicable. In our case today, in this session, we are going to select Windows 2016 base and default Amazon Linux version, which is available on AWS repository. So disk volume for Windows, default or minimum requirement is 30 GB on AWS cloud. And for Amazon Linux, I think it is between 8 GB to 10 GB. That should be sufficient for our test purpose. And if you want to create a free tier account, this is the link you should be using to create a free tier account, first time users of AWS Cloud. Now, in case if you want to select what are the instance type available on AWS, you can see this link, and under documentation of AWS Cloud, you can see different types of instance available, different instance types available, categorized under general purpose, compute, memory optimized, storage optimized, accelerated computing, and high performance computing. Based on your workload as well as architecture requirements, you can select. At the same time, there is a cost associated to all these instances. So before you select, make sure you have sufficient or required approvals in hand for the proposed cost or associated cost here. Now let me go back to AWS Cloud. I already logged into AWS Cloud. So I'm at console home. Now if I want to launch EC2 instances, go to EC2 service. On the console home, there's a small tab here. Go to view all services. Under compute category, select EC2. Now I'm going to launch two machines, one instance with Windows and second would be with Amazon Link. So for Windows machine, on the right side, you have a button, select launch instance button. Here, give a tag, optional tag. For easy remembrance or for easy identification, I'm going to give a tab, even though it's optional, EC2 Windows first machine. Next is select OS. So Windows is from Microsoft. Select Microsoft vendor. Then it'll give type of versions available on AWS repository. You can see here, there's a list available. I will select Windows 2016 base version. Scroll down, drop down menu, scroll down, select Microsoft Windows Server 2016 base. Once it is selected, next option is to select instance type. Here, I'm connected to Mumbai region and I will select, I would need a base configuration, select T2.micro, which comes with one CPU and 1 GB memory, which is sufficient for test purpose. Next, key-based authentication. Either you can select an existing key pair or create your own key pair. If you want to create new key pair, this is the option. If you want to select existing key pair, there's a drop-down menu and select any of the applicable keys here. And here, I'm going to create a new key pair, select a key pair option. So the moment I select a key pair option and create, it will create AWS key pair test one. Okay, so once you give a name to it, there's an option to create and a copy is downloaded locally. It will be under downloads folder. There you go. Okay, now next option is scroll down, select network. So I'm going to use the default VPC for this region and the public IP is auto enabled. If you use a default network, if you use a custom network, you have to explicitly enable public IP assignment. Next requirement is firewall. So I will use, if you want to select existing security group available in this region, under the subscription, go to select existing and there will be a drop down menu. Based on requirement, you can select. I would like to create a new security group for this machine. Now my connectivity is from any machine. So my client machine could be anything. If I want to restrict the connectivity to set of machines or a single machine, you can go to custom or one IP requirement. So wherever you are connected from now, it will be as mapped to that machine only. You cannot connect from anywhere. If it is custom, you can give a range. And if it is anywhere, you can connect from anywhere to this machine. Scroll down. So disk requirement, minimum would be 30 GB. And I will go for 30 GB default. Now on the right side, this is your configuration snapshot. And there's an option to launch instance, select launch instance. So it will launch a Windows EC2 instance. Scroll down, select view all instances. It will take you to the running instances under the subscription at this region. Now you can see there are two instances which I have terminated, which I have launched as test and terminated as well. Now let me launch a similar window in a new tab. so that Windows machine I will manage on one tab and Linux machine I'll manage on second tab. So for Windows, if you want to connect to EC2 instance remotely, you have to change password. So now if you see here, if I try to connect, it will ask me to wait. There is a cooling period of 3 to 4 minutes. Okay. Scroll down. If I want to connect, it will say wait for 4 minutes from the launching time. Okay. Wait for 3 to 4 minutes. Then you can reset your admin password. Meanwhile, let me launch Amazon Linux machines. Go to the second tab under all services, under compute category, the EC2, launch instance. So I'll give a tag to this EC2 Amazon Linux 1. This is my second instance. I'll put it as 2. Now here I need Amazon Linux. So the first one to select is Amazon Linux vendor and versions available are. If you drop down this menu, you can see the list of versions available. I'll select the default one. First one I've selected Amazon Linux 2023 kernel 6.5 MI. Scroll down. Next, we would need a CPU memory, which is referred as CPU memory combination is referred as instance type. So I would need one CPU memory, 1 GB configuration for test purpose. So the instance type, the naming convention given is family type is T2.micro, which has one virtual CPU and 1 GB memory. Scroll down. Here it is key-based authentication. Okay, because Linux machines are key-based authentication. And for Windows machine, you would use a key to decrypt your admin password. Once you log in, you can create your own users based on workload or project requirements or architecture requirements. Now I would use existing key pair here because just now we created one key pair which is AWS key test one. Let me use it. Now, without key pair, you would not be able to decrypt passwords or you will not be able to connect to any Linux machines as well. So for network, I'll use AWS default network at this region and security group, let it create a new security group with SSH enabled because it's a Linux OS. Configuration 8 GB per storage. And on the right side, you can see this is your configuration snapshot and launch. So second tab I'm using for Windows, third tab I'm using for Amazon Linux. Now on the client side, we'll be using RDP for connectivity from my local machine with Windows. I'm trying to connect to AWS Cloud EC2 instances, one instance running with Windows, second instance running with Amazon Linux. So let me attempt a connectivity with Windows. For Linux, I will use Git Bash emulation software. Let me try to decrypt Windows admin password first using SSH key mapped. So that's your public DNS machine, that's your username, then that's your password which we are going to decrypt. Now if you see here, I would need a public DNS name or public IP to connect from my local machine. Let me just make a copy of it. Paste it here and attempt decrypt password. So go to get password option using key file, the key file which is associated to this EC2 instance and which is available under downloads folder on my local machine. Select and open. Option 2 decrypt password. That's my machine name and that's my password. That's my user. So let me attempt connectivity from a local machine to this EC2 instance using public DNS name. Copy on my local machine, launch RDP session. Give the target instance public DNS. Now, username is administrator. Password we just decrypted now. Copy this. There's a copy button. Paste it and launch. If the firewall ports and connect are allowed, required firewall ports, and if network is working fine, you will see the confirmation button here. Select yes, and it will take you to a remote machine, which is remote machine at this moment is on AWS cloud running with Windows 2016 base OS. Once it is logged in, you can do your regular day-to-day work or test activities depending on your project work. So it's a first time login on this machine. It will take few seconds extra to create a profile for this user. You can see that's your desktop. And on the right side of this desktop, it will display your architecture details of EC2 instance for reference purpose. Once profile is created completely. Now, second step we will be using is once the architecture details are displayed, I'll disconnect from this machine and attempt connectivity to Amazon Linux machine. As you can see here on the right side, it will give host name, instance ID, public IP, private IP. Private IP is only for internal communication within network. External communication is not there. If you want to do a external communication, you would need a public IP or public DNS host name. An instance size or instance type is T2.micro. T2.micro comes with one CPU, one virtual CPU, and 1 GB memory. And that's your availability zones and other architecture details, and memory allocated is 1 GB. And this instance type, it has a network low to moderate that will be sufficient for test purpose. Base configuration. If you need, even for test requirement, you need a better configuration, of course, you can change your instance type. First, power off this machine, then change your instance type and restart the machine. Okay, so connectivity to this machine is completed. Let me disconnect from this machine. Let me disconnect. Now, next connectivity is to Amazon Linux machine. Go to browser, Linux tab, Amazon Linux, select Amazon Linux EC2 instance. There's a checkbox on the left-hand side. Now there's a connect button, select connect button. And connectivity is based on SSH client. So go to SSH client tab. Under example, you will find a connection string here. Copy this. Now my connectivity from my local machine, it is running with Windows OS. Now, if I want to connect from Windows to Linux, I would need a terminal emulation software. I am using Git Bash here. So now on this machine, my key file is available under downloads folder. So go to downloads folder, right click. If Git Bash is installed, under more options, you will find a tab to launch a Git Bash session here. Why I am launching Git Bash from this folder? The reason is if you see this connection string, right click, paste that. If we see the service is SSH and the key file it is referring to AWS key test1.pem and username is EC2 user at this machine. Now, the moment you give the key name, it will look for the key man on the local folder first. If it is not available, the connection will fail. Otherwise, second option is you have to give default relative path or absolute path for this key file. So just to avoid the complexity, I'm launching SSH connectivity from the folder where key file is stored. Now, once a copy is done, string copy is done, select. If service is enabled, SSH service is enabled and network is on, you'll find that continue connecting option. Type yes here. It will take you to the Linux machine. Once you are connected, you can print the operating system version using this command cat os release. It will display print OS details running on this machine. Okay, so once test is done, disconnect using exit command. Okay, go back to console. Now test is completed. I would not need these two machines. Let me select these two machines and terminate, because if I keep it running, everything is commercial here. So if you keep the machines running, it will add up to your cost. So I'll select these two machines and terminate these two machines. Two EC2 instance, one running with Windows and second running with Amazon Linux. Select. And generally what happens, because it is test environment, I'm selecting both instances at a time and go to instance state and terminate. But if it is production or in your worker or in your worker environment, or even if you are a new user, make sure you select one instance at a time and perform terminate or delete options. And one more thing, key aspect here is, even if you have a test data on this machine, make sure the test data is stored at appropriate location before you delete. If it says production data or development data as well for end users in your working environment, there will be a set of steps you need to follow to secure users data. Follow the steps before terminating instances. Since it is my test environment, there's no data on this machine and I'm not a first time user. So select these two machines, go to instance state, delete. But whether an admin is first time user or has been using for more times, it is always advisable to terminate instance one at a time. Okay. Thank you.